Is there anybody here who's never heard of degrowth before you saw the poster about this meeting? We have a very, very small number. Usually, if you've heard of it, you will have heard of a chap called Jason Hickel, who wrote a book called Less is More, or Tim Jackson, who wrote a book called Prosperity After Growth, and his more recent book is called Post Growth. So although we have a degrowth movement that has been going on for decades, it's very shy about calling itself degrowth. Now, I only started my activism in 2019. I then woke up to, I had decided in my teens that I didn't want children. I was concerned about the environmental aspects. Things did not look good to me. I thought humanity don't seem to be aware of this problem, and I certainly don't want to introduce any more children into the mix. And fortunately, I found a man who was happy to accept that. And we had a really enjoyable marriage together. And I can testify for the fact you can have an excellent marriage without any children involved. And so after he died, and I had a very mentally ill brother who died a few months later, and then my mother was very distressed about the two bereavements. She tried to commit suicide, and then she died 6 months later after a failed suicide attempt. So I have a great deal of experience of our National Health Service and death, and that is very relevant to a lot of my material. And if you read my book, you will see that I have some very radical views about how we emotionally deal with death at the moment. Now, 2019, Extinction Rebellion became very prominent in the news by shutting the bridges in London. And it was at that point that all my dependents had died, and I'm an empowered woman. My husband left me very comfortably off. I'm very healthy. So I found myself with plenty of energy and the empowerment to do whatever I wanted. And I thought, oh, well, somebody is finally taking the environment seriously. So I got involved with Extinction Rebellion, and that was when I learned the story, how we shove overpopulation under the carpet. Because when I came in, and I learned a lot. There were lots of things that I'll teach you right at the beginning of this chat today that are scientific insights that have been around for decades now. For example, a concept called ecological overshoot. Now, a chap called Bill Rees came up with this concept of ecological footprint, and it's measured in global hectares. So it's a calculation of how much soil you need for your activity. Now, at the moment, humanity as a whole are using more global hectares than there are on the Earth, which is why, if you look at this graph here, we're actually using nearly 2 Earths worth. So you think, well, how? If we're using it at that speed, surely we should be dead by now. But what happens is we're just degrading. We're actually diminishing the biocapacity of our Earth. What we're doing is we're using up trees faster than they can regrow. The oceans can't absorb the amount of carbon dioxide that we're emitting. So the oceans are becoming acidic, more and more acidic, dilute carbonic acid as we put more and more CO2 in the atmosphere. So we're upsetting the balance, and we've got ecosystems that are struggling, and especially in the UK, we have one of the most damaged levels of biodiversity in the world, because we are one of the most heavily densely populated areas in the world. And our ecological footprint in the UK to maintain the lifestyle that we enjoy, we're actually using 3 times the biocapacity that we have within our actual borders. So we're bringing in products from outside, twice as much as we could produce just from within. And as you can see from that, we're contributing to this ecological debt. It's a chronic debt. These figures are collected by an organisation called the Global Footprint Network. Now, they assume that no other biodiversity needs any of this biocapacity. So this is a very optimistic look at things, because obviously biodiversity needs biocapacity in order to survive. So not only back here in about the 1970s, we were using every scrap of biodiversity all for ourselves, every amount of natural resource all for ourselves. So we had already denied other life forms quite dramatically by the time we got to 1970. And since then, we've done nothing to slow down. We're just carrying on because we're really good at GDP growth. And as you will see from my next bit of scientific insight. Now, you see, I didn't know about this in 2019, when I joined up with the Extinction Rebellion. I didn't know that. I knew it was instinctive, it was intuitive. I knew things were bad. But I was maths physics at university. I'm a scientist. So I found out, the science behind it. And I thought, well, that's really bad. And, why aren't we worried about this? And there are 3 good reasons why we're not actually taking any action. And they're all in this second insight. Now, I'm going to need a tiny bit of audience participation here. Just one person. If you could hold the other end of this up and help me ensure that everybody can read it. This is called the IPAT equation. Now, 2 environmental scientists back in the 1970s. Can you all read that? Okay. Now, this tells us a rough idea of what impact we have on our environment. And these 2 environmental scientists identified 3 key drivers to damaging our environment. And they are identified as the size of our population, the level of our affluence, and the level of our technology. Because when we start using things like chainsaws, we can cut down trees far more quickly. So you can intuitively see how sensible that is. Now, all of those are a bit of an embarrassment, because if you think about it, whenever we increase our population or our affluence or technology, we're increasing our GDP. So it so happens that we have wedded ourselves to an economic model that is fundamentally ecocidal, which is really awkward. Now, a lot of intellectuals have been aware of this problem for a long time, but they haven't known quite how to break the bad news. And so people like Tim Jackson and more recently Jason Hickel, Tim Jackson and the Club of Rome have come out with this paper about the limits to growth. Can't tell you the date, but it's a few decades ago now. And there were other organisations who tried to raise awareness and say, some of them sort of concentrated on the population issue and some concentrated on the consumption issue. But essentially, all three of the key drivers to ecological collapse are things that we're so dependent on. You know, we love having children. We love having lots of money, and we love using technology. So it's actually built into our education system at the moment, because we teach people to be a shrewd businessman. And a shrewd businessman knows how to make money out of nature. It goes in and sees an opportunity and makes a big profit. And we're now in this difficult situation where, like in COP26 recently, I don't know whether you're aware, the climate conference, they came up with this loss and damage promise. And they go, you know, they're planning to throw some money at it. Now, throwing money at a problem, which, and the ecological problem, which is very closely linked to the climate problem. But if you're going to try to raise money to deal with the climate, you're going to be damaging your environment while you do that. So the whole concept of degrowth is to deliberately decrease, contract our economy. So it works the opposite direction to everything we have been taught at school, at university. So it is a very challenging concept. And it's a radical movement because the idea is so radical. It travels in the opposite direction to what we've been used to. Now, amongst the degrowth movement, I am the most radical. I have people who are applauding my ideas, but the mainstream degrowth experts are saying, oh no, she's too dangerous, hot potato, that one, because I am dealing with the most challenging aspects of degrowth. I am challenging what we're doing in our National Health Service. I am saying, for example, with my mentally ill brother, he was on palliative care for at least 10 years of his life. Every year he would get pneumonia. Every year they would give him antibiotics. He was in 24-hour care. He was very severely paranoid schizophrenic. And I would say to the care people, I said, why? Why are you giving antibiotics? He didn't want medication. He didn't like any. They used to have to fight with him to give him medication of any sort. And I'm saying, you know, who is benefiting from them? It is painful for me to watch him. He was in physical pain and mental pain for all of from about the teenager when he had a bad trip on LSD. The rest of his life was tragic, and tragic to watch. And the amount of financial resources ploughed in to keep him alive would have kept millions fed, millions, because it's about 50,000 a year, more than that, because he had specialist mental care right at the top end range of mental care. And this is where I'm coming in. I am challenging the ecological ethics of what we are doing, because I'm saying we need an emotional evolution. We need to look at what we're doing in a different light. We need to think, well, we're a very affluent country. We have become affluent by we've been into our colony countries. We've been into that rich in resources. I've lived in Africa. I've lived in Uganda and a couple of our colonies. And they've got the right environment to grow tea and coffee and lots of the luxuries that we love. And we've been in and said, you know, get rid of your existing ecosystems and biodiversity. Grow us tea and coffee, and we'll pay you for it. So we have introduced affluence. We have introduced a whole different way of life, and we've introduced business, the same business mentality as we've used to destroy our own biodiversity here in England. So we didn't do them any favours, and we certainly haven't done humanity as a whole a favour by doing that. We got very rich. And when we talk about getting very rich, we need to look at this. This is the last. This is what you call an exponential graph. My lifetime anyway, I came in about 1956, I came in. Right, and we were really getting going at that point. We've got CO2, methane, nitrous, all of these greenhouse gases straight up in the air. This end of the graph, that's 2050. That's our net zero target. It's pretty challenging, eh? Pretty unlikely the way we're going at the moment. And of course, population, it is sailing off a touch, but nothing serious about it. And it is debatable. It is debatable how accurate that is, because all the global population figures are estimates, and they are rather assuming some of the education, which was bending the curve somewhat, is still going on, and a lot of it isn't, because a lot of the funding for that type of education is not happening anymore. And of course, we're not leading the way in any helpful manner, because if we go back to this equation and why it's been shelved is the distribution between the population, the affluence and technology is not a straightforward one-to-one. For example, a child born into an affluent country like the UK, even if its parents are very poor indeed, will have a high footprint. And that is because that child is eligible for our health service, our education, the huge road infrastructure and houses and all of that. All of that has a huge ecological footprint. And the child, no matter how impoverished the parents, will come into that context and will be eligible for all of those public services. So our public service has a huge ecological footprint and a huge ecological cost. And so a lot of my work, all of my work is sort of focused about saying, look, we've got all these, we've got our human rights. Very recently, October 2021, we had a new human right agreed. And they all agreed every human is entitled to a healthy environment. Okay, so we're already on the back foot because we've made that declaration. But if we take that down and have a look at the overshoot situation, of course, any child born at the moment is coming into a pretty wretched situation in terms of ecological deficit. So they're coming into a world which has been way over carrying capacity, well over 50 years. So they're not coming in with good environment prospects, or not coming in with a good environment situation at all. They're coming into a collapsing environment. And symptoms of collapse are such things, resource wars. You can put Ukraine into the category of a resource war. Very rich, fertile land, very desirable. You've got economic migration. You've got inflation. You've got stagflation. That is a reflection of cost of living going up, is a reflection of the nature that supplies us with all the goodies, struggling to supply us nowadays. So we need to join the dots, because all the things that are going wrong at the moment are all directly linked to this ecological debt that we've built up for over 50 years, and we're showing no intention at the moment of diminishing at all, because we are still fixated with GDP growth. And GDP growth drives all three of the IPAT environmental damage drivers. It encourages people to have children, it encourages people to get rich, it encourages people to buy all sorts of unnecessary stuff, because it is driven by coercive consumerism. Advertising is there throughout mainstream media, and very damaging too. So all of this material, as I'm sure you recognise, is a very radical and different way of looking at things than you folks have been used to.